with the release of Redshift RT, there's just a whole new world of possibilities opening up. So I wanted to go over some of these new features, some of the limitations with the current beta, and how I personally believe you can best maximize the usage out of Redshift RT. So this is a relatively straightforward, simple scene. It's a car. I think it's about 1.2 million polys, not too heavy, and just a curved background and a couple lights. Now, the beta is missing some features, so I think if you're going to be using Redshift RT, you're best served by making brand new scenes and working with it from the start, just to avoid having any issues with older scenes which might have features that are currently unsupported. And I'll actually mention a couple of some of those features that are not supported as we go along in this little demo. So this is a perfect type of scene, I think, for Redshift RT. Product layout, lighting, shader look dev, ArchViz. These are the types of scenes, motion graphics especially, I think that will benefit the most from Redshift RT. And so I've got this render view open. You'll notice that we now have a new icon here, the Redshift RT button. And if we go to our render settings, you'll notice that we have a new tab section here called Rendering Engine. So this lets you switch from standard Redshift, which is now called production, to RT mode. And you'll notice as I switch that certain options get highlighted or disabled. So RT mode disables the options that just don't make any sense for RT. They don't work with Redshift RT. And advanced mode currently does not do that also, but that's okay. All the options that we need for Redshift RT are actually available in basic mode. So progressive passes controls the quality of Redshift RT. I think 256, 128 is pretty good middle ground. If you need higher quality in Redshift RT, you increase this number. If you need faster iterations, you can reduce this number. And then we have our trace depth controls. And right now I think the trace depth is capped at around 8. So it doesn't go as high as production mode, but for most purposes this is more than enough. And so let's make a quick render with production mode. And actually, something else, if you look at the render view, you'll notice that when I switch between these, different icons appear and disappear. So production mode has features in the render view, like isolate selected, select material and object, bucket mode, freeze tessellation. These work in production mode, but are currently not supported in RT mode. So when you click RT, you'll notice that our icon list gets significantly smaller. And eventually, I'm sure as more features get supported, we'll get more of those icons back. But let's switch to production, and let's just do a quick render here. And so you'll see this is what our car looks like currently. There's, some noise. And this is standard production mode. Now, let's save a snapshot. And now let's switch over to RT mode. And let's start it also. And there it is. It's already pretty much done. That's how fast it is. And so if we save another snapshot, and let's just pause it, you'll see that they're very similar. Redshift production mode does capture a little bit of the details a bit better, but in terms of lighting, shading, and the general look, they're very, very close, which is awesome. This means that people will be able to work in RT or in production mode and swap back and forth as needed. So let's say you're working in RT, but maybe you need a little higher quality or something like that. You can always switch to production mode and render out your scene and know that you'll get very, very similar results as you did in RT, which is great. That means you can work in RT, and then if you need, you can commit to a final production render. Or maybe you won't need to do that and you can just render completely inside of RT. So really cool. And let's actually start experimenting with our scene. So in my opinion, Redshift RT truly shines for layout, lighting, and shading purposes. So for example, if I want to move our car around, let's just slide this around. You can easily see how we can rotate our object and just get a very quick iteration resolve of our render. So for layout, you'll be able to just slide this around and kind of get a good idea of what things are going to look like in seconds. And all this is happening on a single GPU. So Redshift RT currently does not support multiple GPUs. It uses the display GPU. So that's something to keep in mind, that it's only a single GPU for now, but they hope to make that work with multiple GPUs. And as you can see, transforming objects iterates very quickly. We can also adjust lights very easily. So if I crank up this light, say to 2, let's warm it up. You'll see how fast it updated. It works with ASIS and supports all the standard post effects. So we have bloom, photographic exposure, a LUT on, and it's all working. Let's adjust our dome light. Maybe we want to change the position. Something like that. And I actually have an area light. So let's bring that down. Maybe somewhere right there. And most of the features on our lights are already supported, which is awesome. So area lights, distant lights, that's way too strong, and point lights, and even spotlights are all currently supported. And some of their options, so for example, the spotlight, we can adjust the cone, could adjust the fall off. You can see on the ground how it's being adjusted. Let's go back to area. And you can enable or disable the visibility. You can change the shape. So right now I was using a rectangle. You could switch over to a disc. You could use a sphere. That sphere is really big. Cylinder. But let's get back to rectangle. You can also adjust the spread. So if I reduce the spread on this, you'll see on the ground it changes. We could adjust the temperature, the intensity. Let's reduce the intensity, increase the exposure. We can use color. So maybe we want green or a yellow, purple. Cool. And I'm just going to disable it for now. And the camera resolves very quickly also. So let me switch over to camera 2 since that's what I'm rendering with currently. So rotate around, zoom in. And yeah, you'll see how interactive this really is. It's awesome. And let's move on over to shaders. And actually, let me change our distant light so it's a little cooler. And let's adjust our ground texture. So we already support most of the Redshift material. Pretty much everything in here is supported except for currently there is no subsurface single scattering or multiple scattering supported. Hopefully in the near future that will no longer be the case. But beyond that, we already support reflection, diffuse, sheen, refraction, and coding. And so let's plug in a texture into the diffuse slot. Now, sometimes this might happen where it might get stuck, so you might need to reload. And now our texture is working. So keep that in mind. I hope that in the future, we'll have better dirty scene state checking. The standard texture options like color multiplier works. The scaling, the color spaces, and even OSL nodes work, which is awesome. So I have this kind of like a colorful noise pattern. So I'm going to plug that in, and you'll see that it just works. So OSL is supported. And a lot of the standard nodes that people use, like the color correction node, are also supported. User data is also supported. So really cool. Currently, one of my favorite nodes that is not supported, though, is the Maxon noise, unfortunately. So I'm hoping once that becomes available, we'll be able to make more interesting procedural shaders. The curvature node is supported. Emission. The standard Redshift noise is also supported. And as you can see, OSL. So there are OSL specific noise nodes that we could use. Let's actually rotate the car a little more. I want to focus on the back. So maybe something like that. And let's adjust the paint color. The Fresnel node is also supported. And just by easily swapping around, you can see how quick this is to iterate with, which is just awesome. So people will be able to quickly iterate their scenes and try out different materials, lighting setups, before committing or deciding to work with a certain look. And this lets you just quickly explore your scenes. Very cool. Nice. And yeah, let's do a comparison render actually. So we can see the difference now between production mode and Redshift RT. And actually something to keep in mind in terms of other features that are not supported. The proxies are not supported yet. Hair and fur is not supported yet. The Redshift particle primitive is not supported just yet either. And displacement, along with VDBs and volumetrics in general. So, and SSS, like I mentioned earlier. But for hard surface stuff, motion graphics type stuff, I think this is going to be just awesome already in its current state. And as more features expand, people will be able to use it for more and more things in different situations. So let's try this. This is kind of cool. And let's rotate our HDR. Try to get a different specular highlight going. It's maybe something like that. And let's reduce our intensity on the light. Okay, this looks cool. Maybe we could turn on our little area light we had earlier. And let's set this to temperature also. Make it a little warm. Let's hide it. So something like that. Neat. Let's let this render. And so since it's a progressive render, all you got to do is just kind of let it do its thing. And we'll save a snapshot. And let's pause. And let's now switch off RT mode and do a production render. And compare the two. And they should look very, very similar, which is just amazing. Something else that isn't supported is currently depth of field and motion blur. But those are being worked on, so hopefully soon we'll also get that. But even for just a beta, having the materials and lights, the general shader nodes that most people work with, and textures working, and this well, is just awesome. Very awesome. And so if I swap between the two, you'll see that there is a difference with some of the minor details. But in general, the look is very, very similar. And so I think that's one of the main benefits to Redshift RT that the Redshift community is really going to enjoy, is the fact that they'll be able to work in RT mode and then, if needed, swap over to production mode. And they might not even have to do that just because the quality is already pretty nice. And they'll be able to make creative decisions on the fly in RT before committing to a slower, higher quality render inside of production mode. So if your art director says, you know, change this color, it's just right there. It's live. It's very fast. But yeah, that should cover some of the basics, some of the limitations, and the benefits to Redshift RT. And I think, you know, this is just going to be awesome as this develops. Please leave any feedback in the Redshift forums during the beta. So if there's any bugs or issues, we can fix them. And thanks again, guys. Hope you enjoyed the demo. Have a great day.